All right, today is a big day in Lubavitch. Today is Beis Nissan, the yortzeit of the Rebbe Rashab. A couple words, I guess, then we'll open the room just to say the Rebbe Rashab is called the Rambam of Hasidus. And there are many reasons for this, but amongst the reasons that I've just thought through, I mean, what did the Rambam do? He announced that he's writing a sefer that will give everybody the ability to fathom and act according to the halacha without having to go down and pass through and deal with all the shakla v'taria of the Gemara. We brought it all down in a way that people could, it's one of the Shulchan Aruch, so to speak, the Mishnah Torah. But so similarly, the Rebbe Rashab did that for Hasidus. I mean, I have to say that most of the depth, whatever depth I have in understanding Hasidus is mostly due to the Rebbe Rashab, particularly to Hemshech Ayin Beis, and I'll leave it at that. And interesting also enough about the Rebbe Rashab, to me, maybe to you, so I'm sharing it, is when he was born in 1860. He passed away in 1920. He lived into the 20th century, and he was a contemporary with Sigmund Freud. There are papers that are written about his confrontations and relationships with Freud at a time when Yiddishkeit was very, very threatened by modernism, as it seems to, when you look back, it always is, right? Whether you're talking about Greece or it's Mitzrayim. But nevertheless, he was very big on one in terms of, that's one of the reasons that, if you could ascribe reasons to this, but at least one of the serendipities that he put it all together at this time, because it was needed. It was needed that people should be able to have a achiza, a grasp on Hasidus without going back to the Kabbalah. And even the Mittler Rebbe is much more difficult to grasp than the Rebbe Rashab. And secondly, he was very big with Reb Chaim Brisk, and notably, and amongst other of what they call the Misnagdim, in going to the heads of government and arguing and successfully for the lessening of difficulties for the Jewish people. Very, 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 very prominent in the political arena, or we'll call it the social arena, political arena. So, and I guess the last thing I could say, I mean, there's a lot to say, but I don't want to spend all the time with this. He started Yeshivas Tamchet Yemimim, Yeshivas Lubav, and he did it. There are a few things that are said about why he did it. When he was asked by his cohorts on the side of who were not Hasidim, what does Eastern Europe need another yeshiva for? And he said that one of the things he said was that this yeshiva will be a yeshiva in which Hasidus is learned with the same kind of precision that the Gemara is learned with. And with that, we can begin to learn Hasidus. All right, so...
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
On what you just said, I'm sorry. What your first thing was that when you mentioned that one could learn answers or something without the shachla v'taria of Gemara. I mean, I've learned that's the point. In other words, if you get the answers without that process, it's like, I don't know. It's like if you take a picture of somebody, if somebody takes your picture at the end of running a 5K, it doesn't mean you ran the 5K. Okay. It's getting to the finish line without the process.
Sure, there's certainly validity to that from the perspective of the depth of understanding. But I'm sure that you look in a Shulchan Aruch when you want to know what to do. You don't look in a Gemara. And that's
Besides
the point.
which, if I can say, it's not so simple. It's not so simple.
Understanding.
We're stepping on each other here. Rivka said.
Okay, go, Rivka.
If you start learning some of the Maimorim with the Rebbe Rashab, you'll see it's not so simple. There's plenty. What he did was amalgamate. He combined all of the things on a certain topic in one place. I'm not familiar with Ayin Beis. I'm familiar with Samach Vav, but it's not simple. It's not like ABCs. It's
No,
still
it's not simple. It's just he brought it down.
Yeah, but but that's not what Avi had said was that you wouldn't have to go through that process, and it's my
Wait a minute,
understanding that it's
could I
the
interrupt
process
you?
itself.
The process that you wouldn't have to go through, you wouldn't have to start with the Zohar and with Rab Shimon, with the Chaim Vital, et cetera, right? Now, in a certain way, you could say that about all Hasidus, but that's what he's particularly noted for taking bringing out the subtleties of relationships between levels and levels, and this is particularly Ayin Beis, in ways that had not been done before. In other words, giving us a depth and breadth of understanding in a way that we didn't have to create ourselves by putting it all together, but starting with Zohar, et cetera, et cetera. So it isn't, you'll look in Ayin Beis Manucha and Samach Bov and the Rebbe Rashad Memorial, and you'll see they are not simple. In fact, they're some of the most difficult to grasp, but what's graspable in them are insights that had not been coagulated before so much.
And there's lots of questions.
see.
There's lots of questions raised and different perspectives discussed.
Yeah. So let's go with our Tanya. Yes. Of course, the Tanya is also a consolidated, but the Tanya is a very different book. The Tanya isn't about the elucidation of Hasidus. The Tanya is about the application of Hasidus to becoming a Beinoni. Lessons in Tanya. Oh, it's our new chapter, 38, on page 513.
Hi, we didn't read the Hayom Yom. You just talked about the Rebbe.
Oh, really? Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
sorry.
That's cute. I'm such in a rush here because it's Erev Shabbos. Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, the yahrzeit of my father, the Rebbe, right? This is Frierdiker Rebbe speaking about his father, the Rebbe Rashab, about who we've been speaking, who passed away on Motzei Shabbos, Beis Nissan, that's today, in Rostov, and he's interred there. The first mimer of Rab Shalom Dabber, the Rebbe Rashab, delivered after the passing of his father. The Rebbe Maharaj passed away fairly young, and his Mamale Makim, of course, became the Rebbe Rashab, but it took a long time. There are at least 10, maybe more years, maybe somebody knows exactly, before he became Rebbe. But in that time, he did deliver Maimorim. And, Maimorim delivered, when they say to a Rav who's expert in Torah and gives Torah talks, and they say, Zoga Maimer. Zoga Maimer means this is something that a Rebbe does. Because, for instance, when our Rebbe was in the process of refusing to become Rebbe, he said sichos, many sichos, and he had a group and a following, and the following grew and grew and grew. But it wasn't until he said a Maimer that's when the Rebbe-ship kind of falls upon him. So there was a lot of time in between, and there were many Maimorim. And the first Maimer that the Rebbe Rashab delivered after the passing of his father was on the second day of Chol HaMoed Sukkos, and the Maimer begins Keter Yitnu, as exposited, the crown was given, and then the last public Maimer in his lifetime was delivered at the Purim repast, the Suda of 5680, beginning Reshit Goyim Amalek, Kate Som Lechashoicha. And they begin the head of all Goyim is Amalek, and will come there at the end will be the light of Purim, which will be the end of all darkness. All right, it should be that way, right? The end of all darkness. Thank you. All right, page 98 in Tanya. Lach. Lach means damp, wet. Lamed Ches. So we've been talking about the virtue of Torah, right? Now, Gadol Torah Shemei B'Lidei Ma'aseh. Greatest Torah that brings the Ma'aseh. So let's talk about Ma'aseh, the other half of the coin, the other side. Not the other side, the other half of the coin. Hine, im kol hanal. Given everything that we've said above, it will be understood, Yuvin Hativ, well, it will be well understood. Ipasach halacha harucha b'talmud u'b'poiskim, And the Psak Din, what the final din is, that's explained at length in the Talmud and amongst the Poskim, the ones who paskin the halacha. And the halacha is this: Dehira lav kadibur dame, thinking, ruminating, having wonderful thoughts and ecstatic elevations of spirit by thinking about Torah is not compared at all to speaking it. In fact, if you said Krishma, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, etc., and you said it only in your mind and in your heart, with all the intentionality of your mind and heart, you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah of Krishma. You have to go back and say it again. Likros. Again, here's how I would call it out. Remember from this, I call it out. Read it. And also, when it comes to the berachos after eating, which the ones which are midaraisa from the Torah, and also the blessings of the Rabbanim, and in davening. And if you say it, this is the flip. Let's say it, you say it, but you don't have kavanah. Before you had kavanah without saying, and we said you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah. What if you did this? You did say, and you didn't have any kavanah in your heart. Well, the halacha is your yotzin. This you fulfill the mitzvah. Because ma'asahu ha'ikar. Your yotzin yedei chavasai, b'di'avad. The better way to say it, of course, is with kavanah. But if you just said it, your yotzin, except with a couple of exceptions. But finishing that thought, your yotzin and sort of lachzir, and you don't have to go back and repeat it. Levad b'pasuk rishon shel Krishma, except for the first pasuk of Krishma, ubichas shana shel tefillah Shemon Esrei, in the first berach of Shemon Esrei. You need to have the intention to what you're saying. That's the minimal kavanah. And just to clarify, a lot of times we talk about kavanahs as mekavin into mekavin. I intend, I think myself about the secret meanings of things, right? Kavanahs are rizal, right? You pray with the kavanahs of the rizal, if one knows the kavanahs of the rizal. But here we're not using kavanah. Kavanah means just intention. You have to have an intentionality. You have to have your wits about you when you say the first pasuk in Krishma and the first bracha of Shemon Esrei. Otherwise, you're not yotzi. But the rest, you don't. As long as you're saying it with your mouth, you're yotzi b'di'avad. So we see the advantage of strict plain doing. These are the berachos in the Gemara that adkan, in other words, until up to here, until the end of the declaration of Shema, mitzvahs kavanah. It's only until the end of the saying of the first Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That's where you need the mitzvah kavanah. Mekan ve'elach, this is a quote from the Gemara, and from then on, mitzvah's kriya. The mitzvah is just to call it out, to read it, to say it. Behind the mishum, why? Because ultimately what we're going to say here is, we've heard this before, but he's giving us more insight and elaboration. Remember, the whole point of this is to affect the world, the physical world. And speech and deed are physical actions. Behind the mishum shehanashama einu tzarich tikun. The reason being, what we're brought down here to do has nothing to do with fixing the nefesh elokis. Nefesh elokis is fine and dandy, and it doesn't need any tikkun. Shanashama ain't tzricha the nefesh elokis. It doesn't ain't tzricha tikkun la'atzma on her own, b'mitzvahs, by doing mitzvahs. What are we doing, however? It's a point of coming down here. Is rak lahamshik or lesakin nefesh ha'chayugnus. The whole point of coming down here is to fix and bring light to fix the enlivening soul, the haguf and the body, through the words of speech, which the soul utterances with the 5 articulated powers of the mouth, which are the throat, the palate, the tongue, the teeth, and the lips, right? The physicality is being affected by this through the simple doing of the mitzvahs. And also shari evere guf, on the other limbs of the body that are involved in doing mitzvahs. So, nevertheless, Amru, our sages have said, that tefillah oishar brucha b'loy kavana, that davening or any kind or a brucha that's done without kavana, and keguf b'loy neshama is like a body without a soul. Pirish, which means what? Just like everything, every created thing in this world has a body and a soul. Shehem nefesh kol chai, which is the soul which enlivens everything. Veruach kol basar ish, and the spirit which is embedded in the flesh of every living person. The neshamas kol asher, the nishmas kol asher ruach chaim be'apuv mikol bali chaim, and also the soul of every ruach chaim, living spirit, which is invested in all animals. V'Hashem mechayes kulam, and Hashem enlivens all of them. Umahava oisim ma'ayin leish, and brings them into being from nothing to something tomit continually. Be'or v'chayes, through the life and vitality, shemashpia b'hem, which he gives into the nefesh achiyunis, the enlivening soul, and the body, both the spirit and the flesh of the creatures. Shegam haguf hachumri, because even the coarse physical body, v'afilu avonim ve'ofer, and even stones, rocks and stones, or stones and dirt, hadaimim, which are completely daimim mamish, completely inanimate. And this, if you have to realize that everything that exists, yesh boy or b'chayis mimenu yisborach, has a light, meaning an energy, and a life force in it, which comes from God. And that's there if it weren't there. If the highest, the godly highest life force and light weren't in even a clump of dirt, there would be no dirt. There would be nothing. Everything would return to the state that it was before it was so-called created. Nevertheless, ein erech b'dimyon klal, there's no comparison at all, ben v'chinas v'chayes hameir beguf, comparing the level of vitality, of vital energy, which is in the body, which in relation to the or and chayas, which is in the shama, right? The body is coarse, physical, and the spirit is ruchni. Shehi nefesh kol hai, which is the soul of every living thing. And even though in both, the nefesh achiyunis, the soul and the body, there's an equality in terms of they both are coming from the concealed levels of Hashem. This is another concealed level. There's two kinds of concealment. There's a concealment of tzimtzum, which is that's the tzimtzum of Seder Histalshalis. As it comes down and down and down, there's more concealment. But then there's an essential kind of concealment where God withdrew and emanates a light which encompasses everything, and that light which encompasses everything has no differentiation, no tangibility at all. That's called Hester also. There is sometimes the language is different, but here it means here, on one hand, everything is equal in terms of the degree of Hester Panim, in terms of the Or HaSoive. Everything is unequal in terms of the tzimtzum and the hispashtus, the degree to which godliness is revealed or hidden in Seder Histalshalis. Just an aside. But from the perspective of Or HaSoive, everything is equal. Shehu b'chinas hester ponim, ulavushim, and then you have the garments, shavim, they all are covered over to some degree. She'or mistater u'mis'ala u'mislabish ba, and in which the light is enclosed within it. Now, when I saw this, actually for the first time this morning, because I had to teach it, I said, wait a minute, it doesn't make sense, it. So I looked in Lessons in Tanya, and Lessons in Tanya has a different girsa, which is bohem, which makes more sense. In other words, that the Or HaSoivev is equally concealed in the soul as it is bohem in the body, both of them. Kishneihem, because both of them, the nefesh achiyunis, the enlivening soul, and the body, hema olam hazeh. They're both from this world. I mean, the body is from olam hazeh hagashmi, and the nefesh achiyunis is from olam hazeh haruchni, the spiritual part of this world. But they're both parts of this world. Which both of them, the the ruchni of olam hazeh and the gashmi of olam hazeh are the places, the whole world of Asiya, put it that way, ruchni or gashmi, and gashmi is the lowest of the world in which godliness is most concealed. Bibichinas has to pun him in the most degree of concealment. So we have two levels. In the Hesteponim, which applies to Soivev, and the descent of levels, as the Tzimtzum, from one level to another, Behistalshalis Oilimus, in the chain of descent of worlds, Mimadregel, from one level to another, Bitzimtzumim Rabbe. Okay, so he says that they're on the prayer, Hesteponim and Tzimtzum. Hesteponim is the face is concealed. That's the essential hiddenness of God, which exists everywhere from the fact that he withdrew himself in order to bring creation into being. And that light, however, is encompassing everything equally. And then you have the tzimtzumim, the various degrees of tzimtzumim. I mean, this is not so much relevant to this. I'm just pointing out why I'm pointing it out, because you see these two levels, Soivikol Almin and Mamalikol Almin, are sort of everywhere present in somewhere under discussion of the way Hashem exudes life from himself. So, but in any case, back to our story. When you're down in Olam Hazeh Hagashmi or Olam Hazeh Haruchni, there's a concealment and some tzimtzum, and in that respect, both the nefesh achiyunis and the body are both in the levels of some degree and a more maximal degree of concealment in the upper worlds. It's in sumin rabim v'atzumim, with very great and strong concealments, or gevuras, hidings. Until what happens? The nefesh, the spiritual energies, come down and down and down through all the only physical worlds into this world, which is both physical and spiritual. And where down as that energy descends, it becomes invested in a degree of light which is much less than the upper worlds, and we call it klippus noiga. It's a covering, as that's a part of the tzimtzum, but the light can also shine through it, and this is where we derive, as we've spoken about further, that the nefesh can go either way. It can go either to kedusha, and that's what we've been created to do, to bring the chayus, the vitality of all this world, from the ground, ecologically, the planet, to all of our relationships in the world, to all of the political and social systems of the world, to Kedusha, right? Yes, that's because Klippus Nagi can go there, or Chas v'Sholem, it can go the other way. But so that's the Klippus Nagi, Lahachiyas Klalos Olam Hazeh, which is the way of describing the life force of the entirety of this world. Achumri, this coarse world. Here he seems to be particularly looking at the physicality of it, but even the spirituality you could call coarse relative to above. That's more editorializing on my part. So this klippus naiga, right? We'll talk now on the physical plane, which is where he's talking. He's talking about physical things. Klippus naiga are those things which can be brought to kedusha. Those things, and how do you know that it can be brought to kedusha? Because it's mutter. It's what the Torah says. Heter means it can be untied. It can be freed from the bondage of klippa and be brought to kedusha. These are all the devorim hamatorim, v'hamatoherim, all these pure things shebolam hazeh in this world. And from this klippas noiga, v'al yoda, and through this klippas noiga, mashpiyim devorim atameim, right? The other side, this klippa, this way or that way. Kihu bechinis mamutzis, because klippas noiga is the intermediary canal, as we've said above. Afal b'chein, nevertheless, ha'ora shehi hamshachas achayis, this ray of light, this ray of illumination, this life force, which is the drawing down of the vitality to this world, Asher Hashem Meir, which Hashem radiates, Umachaya, and gives life, Derech Levush Zeh, through this garment, meaning the shell, the klippa. Ein Shava Bekulam, is not equal in everything, the Bechinas Tzimtzum Behispashtis, in terms of the degree of contraction and spreading out. Right. So, in terms of his, for instance, when it comes to tzimtzum, the way in which godliness is covered over or contracted, there's more contraction, certainly in something. We'll check in the realm of even a klippus noiga. A Sefer Torah has a degree of, it's a parchment, right? But that parchment is now brought into the world of Kedusha by having it being utilized as a Sefer Torah. So Kedusha is evident in that parchment more than when that parchment is just on the skin of an animal. And of course, if you're talking about Klippus Atameus, even more so. So in the terms of Simsum Behispashtis, which is also another Simsum and Hispar, the way it's contracted or the way it flows out, this is all Or Mamale. There are degrees in which the klippa can become expressive of more Kedusha or expressive of, God forbid, the opposite. Now, this is the end of Shabbos's Tanya. We're holding in the middle of a thought. I mean, the thought is going to evolve to talk about the just like there's a vested light, there's a light which is invested in the soul and the body. Both of them through a tzimtzum, right? The nefesh HaChayunis we're speaking about, not the nefesh Elikis, nefesh HaChayunis and the body of the animal soul. Both of them are coming through a tzimtzum. So this is going to be, but one is spiritual and one is physical. So there's a vast difference between mitzvahs with or without kavanah, right? That's where the story is going, at least in this section of Tanya. But we're in the middle. A lot. How much time? I have time. Oh, you have time? It's Shabbos, and what time is? Well, how many hours or less do you have in Eretz to Shabbos?
We moved the clocks last night, so Shabbos is an hour later.
Okay.
Yeah, not till 6 something. We got 3 hours.
Excellent.
Plus.
Okay. So, any comments? Any discussion? We covered a lot of stuff here. Maybe someone will sum it up. Okay. Look, our topic is what is the difference after all, and the mila, the advantage of mitzvahs ma'asis. So, yes, there is a difference in quality between mitzvahs b'kavana and mitzvahs loy b'kavana, but the ikar is the masa itself, right? The deed itself. So much so that the deed itself, even, and this is, I'm just sort of recapitulating here, even so much so that even the deed itself without any kavana, right? Yoyotzi b'diavad. In other words, without any kavana, and I said earlier, it doesn't mean without any Kabbalistic kavana. A mitzvah without even having your wits about you. You're just doing it, right? So you're passing someone on the street, tzedakah, yeah, okay, and you're thinking about something else entirely, right? That's huge, 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 because the whole deal is to change, is to take the life force, the godly life force, which is invested in each and every one of us, and to use it for the side of Kedusha. You have done a mitzvah. You have given tzedakah, right? And with that, the klippas have moved an inch, a foot, depending on the mitzvah itself and how much exertion it takes. You can exert yourself a lot in a mitzvah and still not have any, Kabbalistic kavanas. So that's huge, because the whole purpose is to take the world of klippas and to move it to Kedusha. And that's only achievable through mitzvahs ma'asiyos, You're doing something. With the exception that, well, one exception, I'll let you know, which is that Talmud Torah is also a mitzvah. Right? And if you have an intentionality in Talmud Torah, you're doing more than if you don't. But learning to just sitting and learning, even though you're just learning, at least you should know it's not the intentionality that counts, it's the speaking that counts. That makes you Yotzi the mitzvah. All right.
With the exception of Shema, the first pair.
Yeah, we had two exceptions. Right. But only two. First parak of Tanya and first brachas of Shemoneh Esrei. You could ask why. Why those? And I'm open to hearing why. I have my own little answers that I've made up in myself over the years, but I haven't seen anything about it. Of course, thinking about why those two things need at least the degree of intentionality, meaning you have your wits about you when you're saying it. You know what you're saying. All right. Ubechein.
Just do it.
Just do it. Great. So we'll say,
Don't think so much. It's okay.
yeah. So we'll say good Shabbos.
Virtual.
We'll see you Sunday. Great Shabbos. Bye-bye.
Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos.